And we know it's reality that everything is getting more expensive, and doesn't it just wear you out, honestly? I just got a quote for new tyres and I was like, not another thing. But today, the NT Council of Social Services has crunched the numbers on just how expensive some goods and services have gotten. The cost of living report has looked into housing, power and fuel costs between December 2024 and December 2025. And it found that in Alice Springs, median rents for a 3-bedroom house rose by more than $50 a week between that time to $623 a week. So that's pretty big. And at the same time, the cost of unleaded petrol prices has jumped 20% and diesel 27%. And this, of course, was back in between 2024 and 2025. So before the current jump in fuel prices is battering us in 2026. So what needs to be done to solve the cost of living crisis that we've been sitting with for years and years and years? Craig Kelly is the CEO of Anglicare NT. Craig, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Nat. Thanks for the opportunity.
Oh, thanks for joining me to speak. Now, there's plenty of factors to talk about here, so let's kind of go through them sort of issue by issue. When it comes to affordability with housing, that was quite a big jump to see on an average of $50 a year for that rental price. How worried should Centralians be about the affordability and sustainability of their housing?
It should be. They are very worried and should be. As you said before, none of this is surprising, and we certainly need to talk about what the issues are. But I'd love to be focusing on what the solutions. Certainly, as you indicate, that increasing cost is there. We're seeing up $85 a year increase for a rent for a 3-bedroom home. And look, it was terrific to get that minimum wage increase, roughly $56, but that's swallowed up by the $85 increase, isn't it? So while there's a little bit of work happening, it doesn't solve the overall issue at all. Why
have costs increased so much and to a higher degree in the NT compared to in other states?
There's a range of issues around supply and underlying costs for a small population in a remote place, but all the more reason to have good public policy. This is the issue. We're seeing, as you say, cost of living pressure that continuing to rise in Alice Springs and across the NT, but they certainly hit low-income households the hardest. And what we see is many people have faced families with impossible decisions around choosing between rent, food and transport and power. So I think these are fundamental issues that need a proper public policy strategy to address them.
Well, as you say, it's so much harder for people on low incomes, and it was even harder, talking about rental increases there, but there were some pretty grim findings in the report when it came to social housing. Could you talk us through some of those?
Well, the numbers are stark, really. When you look at, the shortage of social housing, more than 6,000 people are waiting with only 236 homes available. So that's over 26 people per home. Wait times can be up to 8 to 10 years. So we're clearly, as a nation, failed to invest in social and affordable housing. We've been investing in housing as a wealth creation opportunity, not a human right. And we're seeing the ongoing implications of that. And again, public policy has got to change to address that.
You're also seeing rising cost of fuel as well that is putting pressure on people. And I would say that it's something that specifically impacts people in the Territory. We live in a remote space. There is not a lot of public transport. There are not a lot of alternative options for getting around. You do have to drive everywhere. I mean, the price rise too that is brought on by the war in the Middle East is just sort of adding to that. But there was increases even before that occurred. What is that impact is that having on Territory budgets?
Well, I guess a really good question around the underlying costs of living in the Territory and the need to address it. But we saw diesel jump from $149 to $236 tank in a few months during that period, and we already know households spend 15 to 17% of their income on transport. And if you add 26% of their income in housing, you start to see how unaffordable it is. And I think I want to make the point that, if I can, this is not a household budgeting issue. It's a structural failure in housing and utilities affordable, all things that governments have the levers to address, and we think they need to make it a priority.
You're hearing from Craig Kelly, CEO of Anglicare NT. We're talking about a cost of living report that was put out by NT Council of Social Services today, crunching the numbers on just how expensive things have become in the NT, kind of always were, but it's been a huge jump that is impacting people pretty harshly. Now, you were talking about solutions. Well, we've made it to the solutions part of the conversation. Craig, what would you like to see the government doing to address these affordability issues? I mean, how much control can they have over prices? What are the best mechanisms to address this?
Well, certainly if you start with a living wage for people who are on income support, people are all the studies say that people on job seeker and those income supports are under the poverty line. So we need to lift those and get people out of that. We need to look at the supply issues around housing and proper investment. Let's stop de-investing in social and affordable housing, realising that among the housing that needs to be available to people is social and affordable housing. And as we used to do back in my days, I listened to Lionel Richie before. I'm a child of the 70s, so a bit of flashback there. But back in those days, you could get into public housing and you could work towards owning that over a period of time. Those good public policies work. They worked for generations, and we abandoned those. So let's change that. So it's living wage. It's a good housing policies that give people a chance to own a house at some stage. They're really important. And then working on those, the root causes of what the government wants to address. The root causes of crime, we say making sure that young people get access to the services when they need them. Families are supported, kids are staying in school, all those sort of good early intervention and prevention support programs.
You have also spoken about needing to make changes to the remote area allowance and just how much people are getting to put in their pockets to spend on the things that they need to live and survive. And you mentioned too the upping of the minimum wage before really not doing it for people in the territory because that inflation or that gap is higher than the rest of the country. Are you saying that government should sort of move quicker on getting more money and more relief to people immediately?
Yeah, they should. It's a whole picture, right? Those things are meaningful, and we welcome the increase in minimum wage, but a good public policy does more than band-aids or patches around the edges. It doesn't make the meaningful difference. A good coordinated strategy between the federal government and the territory would look at that ongoing investment, making sure if you're going to address the minimum wage, which is great, also make sure addressing other things. Like we saw, there are over 100,000 people were disconnected from their power in 1 year, a 30% increase. So these sort of things are fundamental and they can be addressed with a holistic approach. And we saw during COVID as government was mobilised working closely with community to address these things. And we call for that sort of crisis and urgency to address these issues.
We've seen the NT and federal governments have handed down their budgets, though. No increases, at least for income. Well, not a huge amount of increase for income support, if any. Can people afford to wait?
No, they can't, Nat. And we worry about social cohesion and well-being for communities, and we talk about the disintegration that can happen and the discord, and we see a shift in support for the two parties, and I think this is part of it. If we don't address fundamental issues of daily life for people and affordability, we're going to see these things. So let's not neglect that. Let's listen to the community and do that. And you get 100% right. Both the federal and territory budgets did not address the issue around more support, more housing, and stronger protections. And without action, we're going to see a continuation.
Yeah, well, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But Craig, thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
Thank you, Nat.
Craig Kelly is the CEO of Anglicare NT.